looking at joint tenancies and how you might possibly be disinheriting your kids without knowing that. We looked at one example last week where we were talking about the mule. Dad's as stubborn as a mule, and we gave an example, but I'm going to look at some additional ones this evening just to let you know about joint tenancies. My name is Marsha Goetting, and I'm the Family Economics Specialist for Montana State University. And I've been here more years than I want to admit at this point, but it has been quite the position because I get to travel, I get to do Mont guides, and I just crossed a barrier of doing 50 of those. So that's exciting to me, and I hope exciting to you, because that means there's a lot of topics out there in the estate planning area that you can take advantage of. And I want to thank Jenny Francis for being willing to experiment with me and you, looking at what could happen with, we didn't know what was going to happen with the coronavirus. So I said, let's just go with virtual and we'll see what happens. Well, here we are, and we got proof that you are participating. And so I want to extend to you a special thank you. Thank you for your willingness to do yet one more virtual meeting. I think we're about had it up to here with them. But on the other hand, when it was blowing snow here this afternoon, I thought, I'm really glad I don't have to drive over to Manhattan, because who knows what the roads are going to be like. So as I told the group last week, I do use participant engagement tools. I think those are important when we're doing a virtual session to try to get involvement from you, to give me some sense of where you're at and what you're doing. So one of those ways is to go ahead and use the chat room. And while I can't actually see the chat room itself, what happens is when you send a message, it shows up for about 2 seconds on my screen. So I have to look over real quick, see what it says. But regardless, if you have questions, I will be able to pay real close attention to those once I quit sharing my screen. And another thing I like to do is just see what did people do as a result of our last week's session. Now, I know for many of us, life gets in the way because we've got things that we got to do. But I'm just wondering, did you happen to read the Dying Without a Will website? Did you try out the website? Did you share the information with relatives? So just put a keyword or two in the chat room to let me know what you did as a result of participating in last week's session. So you might have even shared it with your parents. Sharing, good. Okay, checked out property ownership and see what's happening. And you need more information on the Helena program. Ooh, you got to tell me what that's about, more about that, okay? And okay, so we've had a few people share in the chat room. Now, I'm sure some of you are going, oh my gosh, if I click on that, I'm going to lose everything. Well, if you do, go back to the link and just come back in. Because I noticed this evening, I didn't have to let you guys in. You were already there. So, with the low, we're looking at the will and the Helena program. So let me trigger me at the end and we'll get into that. I might even be able to show you the link for that with a little bit of searching. So I also use Wildflower Names. Many of you that have seen me in the past know I love wildflowers, and it's so fun to work the names into the presentation. It's sort of my attempt, I guess, to be humorous or catchy, whatever you want to think about it, but I try to stretch the names to make you help remember what's going on. And so it's the key points that I want you to remember from tonight's program. Now, this is my infamous steer's head, and you can see it's a steer's head, right? We got the ears, we got the eyes, even the nose. 1/2 inch is all the bigger this little thing is. And if you're not careful when you're walking around one of those geysers at Yellowstone, you would step on one of these. They're very cute. So this is the steer's head, and what I want to do is steer you towards an awareness of the potential consequences of joint tenancy ownership. I'm not saying it's bad, But my experience in traveling and hearing stories from people is that, oops, this is really not what the person wanted to have happen as a result of that joint tenancy. So I'll get specific with that. And then I might as well tell you the difference. If we've got joint tenancies and you decide you don't like that, but you still want to have multiple owners, well, how about tenancy in common? And I'll tell you what that means. Now, this is my prickly poppy that I found in Utah, but my folks from eastern Montana say they see some out there every now and then. As a matter of fact, what I hear they're worried about again are grasshoppers. Remember how they took over last year? Well, prediction is again this year. So I don't even know if the grasshopper will eat a prickly pear, but I kind of hope not. So the thing is, how you title your real property and personal property can be prickly from, okay, whose name's going to be on it, but also the result could be prickly because it may not be going to the people that you intended your property to go to. So I'm curious this evening, as you think about your property, personal and real, let's look at the majority of the property that you have. And do you have that in one person's name only? Do you have it in joint tenancy with right of survivorship? And if so, you'll just put JT. Are you a tenant in common? You could put TC in the chat room. Or if you've got another way, for example, you may have a business arrangement like an S Corp, a C Corp, an LLC. So let me know how most of your property is titled in the chat room. Okay, we've got some sole ownership and some with joint tenancies and more in joint tenancy. Okay, well, what I find is I was traveling the state pre-pandemic. Joint tenancy with right of survivorship tends to be the most popular across the state of Montana. In other words, that's the highest percentage. And sometimes it varies from 64% to 84% of the participants say that they have joint tenancies. So my tip from the prickly poppy is just make sure that you know how it's titled. If it's joint tenancy, it's going to say John Jones and Mary Jones as joint tenants with right of survivorship and not as tenants in common. Okay, so joint tenancy with right of survivorship. So what I'm going to use to represent joint tenancies are my pink monkey flowers. See those two? Okay, so I'm going to look at joint tenancies between parents and children. Okay, now why am I doing that? I find that as adults get older, they more often start putting some of their kids' names on their accounts. And this is exactly what Sarah's done. She has a checking account with $80,000 in there. And yes, some of the research shows us that as you get older, you keep more money in your checking account. My dad was doing that, and I was about having a fit. You know, why do you have $80,000 in a checking account and it's not earning any interest? But, you know, calm, daughter, calm, daughter. I want it there just in case I need it. Well, Sarah, in this case, has been having some memory issues, which she realizes. And so she says, you know, Susan, I want to put your name on my account. And Susan says, no problem. I'd be glad to help you out, Mom, with paying some of the bills, pay the doctor bills, such things as that. Okay, so she's got this joint checking account with Susan. Now, the thing that I would have liked to have talked to Mom about before she did this is to say, you know, what if Susan gets a divorce? All that joint tenancy property has to be listed as a part of something that Susan owns, even though technically it's Mom's. It would still be included. And then the other thing, what if Susan's out there on the interstate, has a bad accident, and she gets sued? Who else's property are they going to come after? Yeah, that joint tenancy with Mom. How about if Susan gets addicted to drugs? Okay, that's not a good sign because Susan could go and withdraw money out of that account and mom doesn't have to give permission. Susan could just do it. And then, my goodness, what if Susan has creditor claims? And the creditors then starts coming after that joint tenancy. So those would be all reasons that I would counsel Sarah to really think about the potential consequences of her joint tenancy. Now, later, what Sarah did was write a will. And in this will, she says, I want this $80,000 checking account to be divided equally among my daughters. So you can probably guess what I'm going to ask is, how is that going to be divided? So you can enter your response in the chat room. Is it going to be equally because of the will? Is it all to Susan? Is it all to Montana because we got a conflict in the law? Or all of the answers above are wrong? So you can say equally, Susan, Montana, or wrong in the chat room, and I'll know what you mean. Okay, we've got Susan as one. Okay, got one vote for Susan. And we got another vote for Susan. That's good. And we've got a vote for all wrong. Okay. Well, it looks like those are the only responses. So what I'm going to take a look at is those of you that said Susan are correct. Just like we talked about last week, if you've got property in a joint tenancy with right of survivorship, that will, no matter when it was written, cannot undo that joint tenancy. So mom dies, all of it goes to Susan. And I guess the question would be, will Susan share? And I see some of you smiling like you're thinking, oh yeah, right. But you see, Susan doesn't have to, even though she knows that that was what mom's wishes were. So that would be an example of why you wouldn't want a joint tenancy in this situation. And you see, we can see that a joint tenancy is always going to take priority over will, and it doesn't matter when the will was written. So what can we do about that? Well, we have a neat law in Montana that's called the Montana Multiple Party Account Act. And what that does is allow you to have 2, 3, 4, as many people as you want on an account. But the signer, see, it's almost like a power of attorney, and that's what they call it, an agent. You're having this agent help pay the bills. But upon the death of mom, the agent cannot continue to write checks because there's no ownership in that particular account. So there's a form that we have in our non-probate transfers Mont guide. So all you have to do is do non-probate transfers -Montana, and that would come up. And there's a form in there that was included in the legislative law. And when it's done like that, extension, yay, can have that form in the Mont guide. Since I'm not an attorney, I can't make up forms, and we're not supposed to do that in extension anyway. But if it's statutory, we can. So you mark that multiple party account without survivorship. And what happens then is mom's will, in this case, Sarah's will, comes into play. And she says, I want what's left in the checking account to be distributed equally among her 3 daughters. And voila, that is what's happening. So I hope that if you're ever out with coffee with a group, that you would let them know that maybe joint tenancy with a daughter isn't a good idea, and look at the possibility of a multiple party account without survivorship. And then what's left gets distributed among your heirs, whoever you list in your will. So what do I see? The tip from the monkey flowers, and that's to decide whether joint tenancy or a multi-party account without survivorship would be best in your situation. Oh, I'm going to keep the pink monkey flowers, and I'm going to look at joint tenancy between couples. And I'm going to look at a little bit different situation. What are the consequences for a young couple that are married and they don't yet have children, but they've placed their property in joint tenancy and they don't have a will? And I have a lot of young couples that say, oh, we don't need a will. Joint tenancy is the way to go. You don't have to go through probate. No problem. And I go, let me show you something. Now, we know the title reads John Jones and Mary Doe, in this case, as joint tenants with right of survivorship and not as tenants in common. Okay. And this is what has been done by Tim and Sharon. They're a young married couple. At this point, they don't have children. And we're going to look and see what happens. And of course, I have a car accident here with Tim dying first and Sharon dying 3 days later. So the question becomes, who is going to receive Tim's and Sharon's joint tenancy property? Don't forget, Tim dies first, Sharon dies 3 days later. Is it Tim's parents, Sharon's parents, half and half, or the state of Montana because they don't have children? So I got one vote for Tim's. Another vote for Tim's. And we've got 3 for Tim's. Anybody else want to get their bid? Oh, we're good. We now have got one for Sharon, another one for Tim. So the majority of you are saying it's Tim's. Okay, now let's take a look at this. The answer is half and half. Now, I see some of you looking very puzzled, and I could just read your brain, and you're saying, what? Why would that be? This is what the legislature has done. They're saying if neither joint tenant survives the other by 120 hours or 5 days, the property is split equally among their heirs. So half to Tim's, half to Sharon's. And I forgot to tell you, Tim's folks gifted them a home upon their marriage. So that means Tim's folks get half ownership, Sharon's folks get half ownership. But I think Sharon's folks would turn it over to them, don't you? Yeah, and in some cases, maybe that would be true. Okay, so we know no children, it's going to go half and half. So the kids that I talked to originally about this, I say kids, they're younger than I am now, but I'm saying, oh my goodness, half and half. You may think that's fair because you kind of came into the marriage with equal amounts of money, but let's just look at the situation and say, what if Tim dies first and Sharon dies on the 6th day? Now whose relatives receive the property? And I know you're all going to say Sharon's. Right, because she met that 120-hour survival requirement. So therefore, her parents receive it all. Tim's folks, nothing. Maybe not the way you want it, but this is the example I give when I'm asked to talk to young couples, like the Young Ag Couples Conference, because many of them at that point of life don't have children and they have strong feelings about where they want their property to go. And they're just aghast that it could go to one side or the other. And see, that's what could happen here. Tim could be the one that lives the longest. So everything that Sharon had goes over to him, and then it goes to his folks. And Sharon's folks don't receive anything. So I can convince a couple without children why they need a will. Now, what the will would do is take over after both of them are deceased. I mean, Sharon can't write a will and say, upon my death, my share of the joint tenancy property goes to my folks. No, it's already in joint tenancy, so it goes to Tim. And then Tim's goes to Sharon, and then they both have wills that say, in case of a simultaneous death, or if one of us doesn't survive the other by 30 days, here's where we want our property to go. And that's where the will takes control. So we're looking at three possibilities that could happen with this joint tenancy property for a young couple that doesn't have children. So if you've got kids that are maybe in this situation, this might be something that you could share with them. Remember, how many hours is it? 120 or 5 days is how long the heir must survive. So married couples need to be aware of this 120-hour survival requirement when we have joint tenancy with right of survivorship property. Now here we have a nice heart-leafed arnica, okay? And what I've got is heart-to-heart estate planning that is going on between Joe Hart and Brooke Hart. And they have heartfelt intentions. And what Joe has done is he's got a $100,000 certificate of deposit, and he's placed it in joint tenancy with his sweetheart. And notice I added wife. I was doing this program and somebody raised their hand and they said, is the sweetheart a wife or a lover? And I said, well, it could be both, couldn't it? But anyway, I could tell what they were thinking. And I thought, well, I'll just make it clear. His sweetheart is his wife. Okay. And then Joe later changes his heartfelt intentions. And what does he do? He writes a will and he says, I'm going to leave it to my son, Eric Hart. So the question is, who gets the $100,000? Is it going to be Brooke because of the joint tenancy, or is it going to be Eric because the will was written most recently? So tell me in the chat room, Brooke or Eric? We got one vote for Brooke. We've got another one for Brooke. And Brooklyn counts. That's okay. So we got 3. We got Brooke. All right. That's the response that I wanted to see. You now know that you cannot undo a joint tenancy with a will. Brooke is the one that's going to receive that $100,000 certificate of deposit. And if Joe really wants his son Eric to receive it, what he's got to do is sever that joint tenancy. Okay, then he can place the CD in his name, and he could put a payable on death designation to his son. Or he could write a will and says that CD goes to his son, Eric. Okay, so you can't undo a joint tenancy with a will. I think we all said this last week, but put it in the brain. That is something that you can share with others. So have a heart. Make sure that you review your joint tenancies on your checking and savings accounts, your home, and understand potential consequences. Now here we have a Jones columbine. And I know you're probably used to seeing columbines that are this tall, way tall. Not this little booger. It's only about 3 inches tall, and it grows way up in the mountains on a scree pile. And it's so exciting to hike in for 3.5 hours in Waterton National Park and find that little booger. So what I've got here is a coin collection. Jack Jones has his coin collection, and he has a safe deposit box with his brother as signer. Now, in his will, he has a separate listing. He has a paragraph that says, I have a separate listing of tangible personal property. and his coin collection, he put coin collection, and he wants that to go to his sister, Susan Jones. Yes, of course I'm going to ask, who is going to get the coin collection that belonged to Jack Jones? Is it going to be John, because he's a signer on the safe deposit box, or is it going to be Susan, because she was listed in a separate listing of tangible personal property? So tell me in the chat room. We've got a vote for John. Another John. Okay, let's see what our answer is. Well, when I first asked this question, I was asking attorneys, and at that time I got 50 and 50. And I thought, well, this is great. We've got two Montana laws that are conflicting with one another. But eventually it won out with the brother that has his name on the safe deposit box. So my question for you is to think about the kinds of things that you have in your safe deposit box. And should that box be in joint tenancy with right of survivorship with someone? See, if you sign, when I signed for my folks, I thought I was just signing to be able to get in there. I didn't realize that I was signing a thing that said I was the joint tenant. And, you know, what a thing, because what you're setting yourself up for is family distrust. You know, what could happen is that people think you got in there and you took all those silver dollars. Shame on you. And it could be dad or mom picked them out some time ago and gave them away. How about temptation? Well, if I was still in Kansas, I might have been tempted to, but it's kind of hard to get in a safe deposit box when you're in Montana. But also suspicion. And I know I've seen this happen in families. And one person shared a story with me that grandma, now this is a grandma that was putting money in cash in the safe deposit box because it was during the years we had an inheritance tax. So she thought she was being sneaky by putting the money in there, and she had her grandson as the signer. Well, after grandma died, the son went to the safe deposit box, and he had a couple of witnesses along just to, protect himself. And lo and behold, what was in that safe deposit box? Nothing, not even dust. And of course, the whole family blames the grandson. They're convinced that he took that money. And the grandson to this day says, I did not take that money. And you see, it could have been that grandma was starting to have some memory issues, and maybe she thought she had 600,000 and put in there. But yeah, so I would just ask again, should your safe deposit be in joint tenancy if you've got other items in there that aren't titled, like jewelry, coin collection, what have you? Sure, if it's in sole ownership, then they're going to have to drill the lock. But the money that you would spend between $75 and $100 may be well worth it to spare a family member from being suspected of stealing, so to speak. So should your box be in joint tenancy? Now, this is the Mules Ears that we talked about last week, and we did look at dad and mom, whether or not they're stubborn as a mule. We found out that we had the two kids, okay, but the kids were worried about mom or dad remarrying, and a floozy, of course. And we found out that, yes, indeed, if he died, even if he wrote a will, that she was going to get it all. And then upon her death, it was going to go to the children, 50-50. Okay, so if she'd have married someone else, okay, and then she put it in joint tenancy, then he would get it. So that's the way it goes with a joint tenancy. The surviving joint tenant takes all. So not the best idea if you're in a remarriage situation and both of you have children from a prior marriage. Now here we have a couple of hair bells. And I took this photograph after a rainstorm, and it was just so fun to see the dots or the water drops on there. So we've got two hair bells. And now we're going to look at joint tenancy property between a parent and a child, but not a checking account. This is an example of dad placing property in joint tenancy with his son. Did he ask his attorney about doing this? No. Did he ask his accountant what the tax consequences might be? No. He just was convinced he's going to save on inheritance and estate taxes. Okay. And I would do the same thing with dad that I did the other mom. What if the son divorces? What if the son is sued as a part of, an accident? Dad made a gift. And in this case, it was substantial. Did he file a gift tax return? And if he didn't, there's penalties. Okay. And the other thing is that dad's estate is going to lose what's called the step up in basis on half of it. So let's just take an example of that. Let's say that when dad bought the land, it was $50,000. Okay. And when dad dies, it's worth $6 million. So if dad would have kept it as a sole ownership, the 50,000 would have stepped up to that $6 million. And let's say at that point, the son decided to sell. He left it to the son. There's no capital gain. There's no federal estate tax, and there's no inheritance tax. But by dad making the gift, we only get to step up half of that. So that means, roughly speaking, we would have $300,000 is the step up in basis. And then if the son sold later, then he's got sort of that double taxation thing. So if you know somebody that's thinking about doing this, don't just let them do it willy-nilly. Let's at least talk to the attorney. Let's talk to the accountant and make sure we know what we're doing. Because that dad didn't know that Montana had eliminated the federal estate tax for $6 million. Now you can have $12 million and not have a federal estate tax. But at the time, it was even less than that. So let's say that dad is married and the son is married. Okay. Now, if dad dies first when they're hauling sugar beets and the son dies 3 days later, who is going to receive that property? Is it dad's wife, the son's wife, half and half, or the state of Montana? So, excuse me. Okay, I got half and half, dad's wife. Okay. I'm glad I asked this question again because this is the same as Tim and Sharon, only it's between a dad and son. So dad's wife is going to receive half. Son's wife is going to receive the other half. And I sure hope they're going to get along because they're both going to be operating this ranch together. Okay. Now, that same rule applies. If neither joint tenant survives the other by 120 hours, the property is split. That's why we have the half and half. But let's look and see what happens if the son survives until the 6th day. Yeah, son's wife receives it all. What if dad's is the one that survives the longest? Then his wife receives the whole ranch. So this is probably not what dad intended to have potentially happening. So that's why I say, excuse me, it could go all to dad's wife, all to the son's wife, or half and half. So keep that in the brain. So you need to decide, is a joint tenancy appropriate tool between parents and children when they have real property? Think about that very carefully. Now here we have an albino fairy slipper. And when I first saw it in Yellowstone, I thought, oh my goodness, this flower is sick, because this is what they normally look like. And then I got down on my hands and knees and I was looking at it really close, and I could see there was no wilted leaves or anything. And I really jumped up and down. My husband's saying, what's wrong? What's wrong? And I'm saying, I'm seeing my very first albino fairy slipper. So of course, I have to use it in a presentation. So let's look at the difference in assets. You know, I talked about basis, and basis was that $50,000 that we may have had in something. Oops. And let's look at the difference in gifting while alive versus leaving this inheritance in black and white, or in red and black. Okay. We've got Grandpa Albino with this $50,000 that I talked about. So that's his basis. And he believes his grandson is ready to operate the ranch, and he wants to minimize his death taxes. So he gifts the whole kit and caboodle to the grandson. And look at that, the value is worth $6 million. So he's gifted it to the grandson. Grandson's okay with grandpa coming out and, you know, giving directions now and then and making suggestions. Now, does Grandpa Albino have to pay a federal gift tax on his gift of $6 million? So you can enter yes or no in the chat room. Yes, I've got one vote for yes. I got a vote for no. Let's get a couple more. Oh, another no. Let's get it tied. Oh, good. We got a tie. Ah! So we're 50-50. And the answer is no, because Grandpa can give away up to $12 million. It's actually $12,060,000 and not have to pay a gift tax. Isn't that amazing? Okay, it is. And why is that? Well, we can see by this chart where the federal or where the gift tax exclusion amount is. And, you know, back in 2001, it was $675,000. In the year 2022, it's $12,060,000. So dad would only have to file a gift tax return because he gave more than $15,000. But when the calculations are done, he doesn't owe anything. Okay, so you can give $16,000 this year. I forgot, it's changed. $16,000 to as many people as you want. So if there's somebody out there above the 12,60,000, I'm sure all of us in the class would be willing to help you out and accept a $16,000 gift. Har, har, har. Couples, if you're married, wow, you can give up to $24,120,000. That's a gift. Wow. See, and this is similar to the estate tax. I mean, but they're unified. So look at it this way. You can either give 12.6 million as a gift, or you can have 12.6 million as an estate, but you can't have both. They're unified. Okay, so you can take one or the other, use half of one, and then use the other, however you want. So if we look at this exclusion, what do you think is the grandson's basis in the gifted property? Is it the $50,000 that grandpa paid for it? Is it the $6 million of the fair market value at the date of the gift? Or is it $5,950,000 because that's the difference between what he paid and the fair market value? So we're looking at what is the grandson's basis. We know grandpa had a $50,000 basis. So is it 50, 6 million, you can just put 6M, or 5.9 if you think it's the third answer. So we've got 6 million. One vote for 6 million. We got one vote for 5.9. We've got 50,000, and we've got another 6 million. Okay, isn't it nice? We kind of don't agree necessarily, but let's see what it is from gifting. What happens when you make a gift like this is the donor's basis. That's the person that's giving the gift. That basis carries over to the donee. So that $50,000 that grandpa had in the farm goes over to the grandson. Okay. So, oh no, the grandson is going to sell the ranch for $6 million. Oh my. Look at that capital gain. You see, the basis was 50,000. He's selling it at 6 million. That in between is the capital gain. So there is no inheritance tax, there's no federal gift tax, but oh my, we've got to declare that $5,950,000 as income. It'll be taxed. So what I did was add up, and the grandson, because he's selling the place, $1,600,550 in taxes. Now, I don't want to call this grandson stupid, but I want to say, hey, grandson, you know, if you didn't need to sell the place, don't do it because you have the capital gain. And I would have also visited with grandpa and said, hey, you know, here's the situation. So now we're going to look at a difference in the approach. And what grandpa is doing is he's going to leave an inheritance. So grandpa leaves the $6 million ranch to his grandson. Now, what is the basis that the grandson has now? Is it 50,000, 6 million? That's the fair market value, or 5,950,000. Okay, my fingers are waiting. 50,000, 6, 5.9. Okay, we've got 1, 6, 2, 6, a 50,000. Okay, this is where the step up in basis comes in. Yes, grandpa had a 50,000, but it stepped up to the 6 million because that was the fair market value at the date of death. Okay, so that's how that wording comes in, step up. And what that means then, there is, and if the grandson wants to sell it, no capital gain tax because he sold it at the stepped up basis. So if we were going to look at making some sort of recommendation, you know, wouldn't we probably recommend that even though the grandson is ready to take over, and I had this happen with a gentleman who had brain cancer. And he thought, aha, this is what I'm going to do. He put all the property in his son's name. So that property didn't get a step up in basis when the dad died. And, you know, it was obvious dad was going to die in that year because of the brain cancer. So again, this is a time when you've got something this valuable. Let's visit with the accountant and the attorney before we go off half crazy. So, and again, if the grandson would sell it at an increase in value, like 6.5 million, then yes, we do have a capital gain, and then he would pay on that. Excuse me. And the same way, if in 2071, of course, who knows what the law will be then, but right now, he would get a step up in basis. So the step up in basis right now is generational, that every time somebody passes away, not that we want them to die, but when they do pass away, there is a step up. And that applies to our house. It applies to our stocks and bonds, mutual funds, all those kinds of things get a step up in basis when the person passes away. So from a tax-saving viewpoint, the grandson is better off if Grandpa Albino leaves the land as an inheritance instead of a gift. So these are my twin flowers. Twin flowers are tiny, you know, they're about that high as well. But that makes me think of these twin brothers that I met in eastern Montana. And they told me that they were operating a joint ownership. Okay, or they were operating a feedlot and they say it's joint ownership. And I said, well, joint ownership, what do you mean? And I said, is it a joint tenancy or a tenancy in common? And they said, well, we don't know. And I go, aha. Well, the wives then came up and they said, we're going to find out. We're going to see what this thing is. Well, lo and behold, they were operating as joint tenants. These two twins are operating as joint tenants. They both have spouses and they have kids. Well, to summarize what we've learned so far, we know if Rob dies, Bob gets it all. Now, if you're the wife, you're less than thrilled about that. And the reality is you can't totally disinherit your spouse. But if she has some other assets, then she doesn't get this, this feedlot, for example. And then when Bob dies, it's going to go to his wife. This is not what they wanted to have, but I showed them so they would know. And then when the wife dies, it would end up going to their children, not to Rob's. Rob's kids don't get anything. But if they would have had that as a tenant in common, it means Rob owns half, Bob owns half. Okay, they don't draw a line down the center of that feedlot. It's undivided interest in the whole thing. So we see with their wives and their kids again. But if Rob dies, no, Bob does this time, sorry. Okay, it's only Bob's share that we're talking about. So if Bob dies, who gets his half? Okay, and I know what you're going to say. Of course, it's going to be his wife. Okay, yeah, that's the tenancy in common because that's his half. His half goes to his wife. Okay, same way with Rob. He dies, his share goes down to his child. Okay, and then Rob could write a will. And if he wanted to, he could say, I leave my wife 1/4, and his children are actually adult children at this point. And so he decides to leave them 1/8 each. And that takes care of his half. But that also means that we've got 4 people that are running this feedlot, and that might work or it might not work depending on the personalities that are involved. So we need to read the title to make sure we know the difference between a joint tenancy and a right of survivorship. And be sure that joint tenancy is not your only estate plan. So I'm looking at the clock and I want to make sure that I leave time for more questions. So my observation from a lady slipper up there near Missoula Way, it's time to wrap it up. And I hope I steered you to an awareness of the consequences of joint tenancy with right of survivorship. I hope I steered you to an awareness of the difference between joint tenancy and tenancy in common. And if you don't have a memory, like this elephant's head, you've all seen an elephant's head, haven't you? The ears and the nose going down. I think they're so cute. Okay. Oh, 48 monk guides. I now have 50. Yay. On a wide variety of topics. So if you are interested, our website there on estate planning, and even if you just Google estate planning, Marsha Goetting, Montana, you will have a chance to look at the things that are out there. And don't forget, as these alpine forget-me-nots would say, they're also available from our MSU County Extension offices. Now, next week, what we're going to be talking about on next Wednesday night is tools for avoiding probate, thus saving more money for your heirs. So hope to see you all there. And oh, of course, I couldn't resist copying President Cruzado. Go cats, go. Okay, enough of that. And we're going to stop sharing. And I invite you to, well, I see I've got a question or two. Okay, Helena program, don't want to forget that. Oops. Okay, we have somebody that said, I'm confused. I thought he was gifted at 6 million. Okay, that was the fair market value of the property, but the basis was carried over when it's gifted. But the basis is stepped up when somebody dies. So the Mont guide that I would recommend that you read is, we just finished one on income tax consequences of, and we talk about the step up and the carryover. And I was trying to get it done as quickly as I could because there was a proposal to eliminate the step up in basis. And that would have affected all of us because you sell your house. Okay, somebody in here, or no, I'm sorry, you don't sell your house. You leave your house to someone. That someone would have to pay a capital gain tax on it, even if they didn't sell it. And so that's why I thought we need to know the difference between step up and carryover and make our plans accordingly. Okay, now what about bank accounts payable on death? When you have those bank accounts, they are payable on death. There is no probate, but there is a value, and if it's POD to Marsha, hello, I go to the bank, I have an affidavit of death, and they just give me the money. But there's really not a step up with money like there is with land, your home, and some of those kinds of items. Maybe you do have a coin collection and it's worth millions. Well, that would be subject to this step up in basis. And I've got a little bitty one, but I would want to make sure it gets stepped up when I give it to my nephew, for example. Okay, now the Helena program. Let's see. Maybe I will just say this. If you use your browser and you Google legal developer -Montana, that will take you to the legal developer site. And in there is a place where you can check on forms. And when you do that, you'll discover that they have a will for single people. They have a will for married couples. They have a homestead declaration, okay? And they have severing a life estate without probate. So they've got some really, really good resources there, but particularly the wills, because you can fill those in or you can print them out and change them as you want, because you would want to make it specific to your situation. And if you're over 65, they will work with you one-on-one, either through, like we're doing this evening, or a telephone call. So if you get to that site, they also have a telephone number that you could call and you could see if you're eligible. Okay, I've got a question. Let's see. Can you will a child? Who's going to want your child? No, that was snarky. Let's talk about nominating. In your will, you are going to nominate a guardian. Okay, that's the person that takes care of the child. You are going to nominate a conservator, and that's the person that is going to handle the money. Okay, now you may have one person that you want to do both functions, or you may want two different people. You know, I told my sister I would be willing to step up to manage the money, but I knew I shouldn't be the parent type. And so that worked out well, and I really celebrated when my last niece and nephew reached age of majority. But here's the deal. You make somebody the conservator, you make somebody the guardian, and at age 18, the kid says, hello, guardian. Hello, conservator. I want my money. You see, at age 18, they get it. And I know one kid that inherited a $2 million ranch. He lost it. He wouldn't listen to his uncles. He thought he was a smart person, and he lost it. And there went that legacy that Dad left. And you know what Dad could have done is say, I want this ranch to go into a trust to benefit my son. I want him to be able to go to college, and he doesn't get the deed until he's at least 35. Or as one lady told me at one of my meetings, she came up to me and she's real quirky and said, guess when I get my trust? I don't know, age 65. You imagine? It would be cool. I mean, you'd have a really nice retirement fund. But I could just bet her parents and grandparents grew up in the Depression. And they didn't want to have a trust brat on their hands. They wanted her to earn her money, and therefore it's available later. So we're not going to will the child. That's good. Can I recommend an attorney to write a will? Nope, I can't. I'm a state employee for Montana State University, and therefore I can't. But what I can say is I have a mock guide that's called Selecting an Attorney. And I take you through the process of questions to ask. And one of the most important things that I find when I'm looking at attorneys and whether I believe them and all this kind of stuff is, do they belong to this specific group? So you can write down the word better. BETTR. That stands for business, estates, tax, trust, and real property section. Okay, that is the section of the state bar that offers continuing legal education programs that I go to. They are the ones that review the mock guides, quite frankly. And when I come across an attorney that says he's an estate planner and he doesn't know what extension has to offer, I'm biased. I know he doesn't work with the section, because all of the section members know that extension and the state bar have worked together since 1980. to make these kinds of materials available. I knew I didn't have the background once I got here, so I went to this group and I said, hi, would you assist with the review of these materials? And I got to admit, they laughed at me and I was really embarrassed. But the thing was, there was a publication that Extension had that was written by somebody, and it was written in the first person, and quite frankly, it was bad. But it wasn't mine, it was somebody else's. So I'd like to think I've established a standard that, and our attorneys all over the state use our mod guides, and that to me is the key. If they're using them for the classes they're teaching them, I've got several of them that are just handing them out to their clients because they say, we can tell when a client has either been to one of your workshops or read some of the mock guides, because they come in much more informed, and it really saves them money, because if they're charging per hour and the attorney's telling you what I'm telling you, get it with your taxpayer dollars at work, okay? Why pay an attorney $300 an hour to do what the basics of what I'm doing? And that's kind of what we're doing tonight. We know there's a lot more, but I hope there's something there that you got that you can say, aha. And if you tell somebody else about it, that gives you practice in getting it to stay up here, or at least it does me, okay? Are there other questions that you might have? Or I can even officially unmute you and you could ask something. Well, that didn't work. I have now allowed you to unmute yourself if you want to ask a question. But I suspect most of you are a little bit shy.
I have a question.
Okay, I can see a blue box around Michelle. Is that you?
Yes, it is.
Okay,
My name
hi,
is
Michelle.
Hi. One, just want to say I love your speeches. They're very, I love the flower stuff. Um,
Good.
but so if someone bequeaths me a house in tangent with my little brother, but it's not a house, it's a trailer. Does that fall under the same guidelines as an estate, or does that go under a DMV?
Okay, let's take a look at that. You have a trailer, and if I understand you right, it's one you're living in or you have, and it's titled between you and your brother.
It's not mine yet. It's my mom's. But I know if she leaves it, it's gonna be in our names.
Okay.
But like I said, we don't have much property, but it's a trailer. It's great.
Uh-huh.
But would that be considered a state, like to a will or trust, or would that be just DMV and put your name on the title?
Yeah, okay. We got to look at the trailer first, okay? Is
Okay.
the trailer one that you can pick up and move? Or in other words, is it on a lot and it's got wrapping around the bottom? I mean, is it
Yes.
more like a home?
Yes. Yeah. It's a home. It's a modular home.
It's a modular.
So it's one.
See, I don't think
Yes.
it has a trailer. It's a modular. Okay, so mom can write a will and she can leave that to the two of you. Okay, the question is, two of you, how are you going to take it? Or if she does a transfer on death deed, which we'll talk about next week, will she transfer it to you in a joint tenancy or tenancy in common? So both your names are on it. So that means if you die, your brother gets it all. And you could write a will and say you want to leave it to your sweetie pie. That's not going to happen. If you have it as tenants in common, then you can write a will and say you leave it to your sweetie pie and he gets it. Or if you have a
Well,
child, they would get it.
I'm sorry, I was misspoken. It is not a modular. It is a trailer that's parked in a trailer court. It's not a modular. It's movable. So it has a title,
So
not a
yeah,
deed.
okay, think of the title being very similar to a deed. But in this case, because it is movable, it doesn't qualify for a transfer on death deed. Okay. But this is
Okay.
the same way. Your mom has her name on it right now. Then she can write a will and she can leave it to the two of you. And then are both of you going to live there, or both of you own it, or however that will be for you to work out. But it's
Okay.
not, I mean, it's technically an estate, but there's no taxes, inheritance, or estate or anything like that.
Okay. No, that's good to know, because like if she didn't sign the title over to both of us before she perished, God willing, she doesn't do it for a long time. I just wanted to make sure that we were in a safe set, just having it in her will to be bequeathed to us.
Yeah, and if it's bequeathed to you, depending on the estate size, see, there's all this stuff depends. But if the estate is low enough, you don't even have to have a probate. Like you as the heir would be able to take that title, and the Department of the Department of Motor Vehicle Services has a gazillion forms, and you can find the form to transfer the trailer from mom's name into you and your brother's name. And then you become the owner and you make decisions and you pay the tax on it, etc. Okay, any other questions? You're welcome, Michelle. Okay.
I have one more, sorry.
That's okay.
If no one's say that hypothetically, okay, say if a parent is living and the spouse had deceased already, and then their sibling got married. I know we discussed this last week, how it goes up on the chain, and then the husband's parents both exist. They're both alive and well. Does the money or their estate, when the kids perish, does that go up to the parents, or does it go to like siblings?
Okay, it goes to the parents first. If an individual passes away,
First, would it be a half, like half to the dad's? Sorry.
yeah, it would. Well, let's just
I'm
make sure I
losing you here.
understand it right.
Sorry.
We've got a person right here, and this person is not married, correct, or divorced.
Correct.
Okay.
They're married.
There's no children. There are no children.
No children.
Okay.
Right.
So this person passes away, and even if it's only $10,000, half of that's going to go to mom, and the other half is going to go to dad.
Okay.
Brothers and sisters don't inherit if parents are alive.
Right. So would it go to both mom and dads, or would it go to just the sole survivors, mom and dad?
Oh, okay. Wait a minute. I thought we only had one person here. You're saying we got a married couple?
Married couple. Say they both perish.
Okay, they both die.
They both die. Say there's two parents, mom and dad on the husband side, and a mom on the other side. Does the money get split between three of them, or does it just go to his side or her side, depending on who died first?
Okay, so the way it splits out is half and half. And if there's only one person over here, that one person gets one half. If we've got two people over this way, then what we've got is a fourth and a fourth.
Okay.
We don't split it equally. It goes up the tree based on, the half and half business.
Okay. Okay. I decided to check because with the tangent stuff, it was starting to confuse me a little bit. Sorry.
Yeah, that's okay. This stuff is not something that just sunk in my brain right away. I had to have all kinds of drawings and hear it 15 times. So you're doing good. Just keep coming and you learn something new every time, I hope. Well, I think that I'm going to let you go tonight, and thank you once again for attending another virtual conference. Well, not conference, a session. And I'm looking forward to next week telling you all these secrets about probate and how you can save money. And we might as well. There's really some simple things that can be done, but there's also a cost to one of them that I'll tell you about later. So be safe, keep healthy between now and next week, and I'll see you on, let's see, that's the 23rd. Okay, night.